What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be going over how I think the classes rank when it comes to the skill ceilings in TF2. So if you don't know what a skill floor or a skill ceiling is, a skill floor gauges the minimum required skill to hit a baseline of whatever it is that you're going over, and a skill ceiling gauges the skill required to hit the theoretical peak of whatever it is that you're going over, which this video is specifically about TF2 classes. So, unlike my last video on skill floors, I just want to say that if a class gets put into an easy category or one of the lower tiers in general in this, that by no means means that that class is a easy class to hit the skill ceiling of. I would say in TF2, all skill ceilings are very hard to hit, but I know that if they're put into an easy or a mid skill ceiling, I'm basically just saying that they're easy or mid compared to the other classes when it comes to skill ceilings. So as you can see, the higher I put a class in this video, the more time in my opinion, it takes that class to hit their theoretical max of. So the last thing I'm going to go over before I get into this video is that I do have a lot of hours in this game, which does not mean that everything I say is gospel on this, but it may give you perspective as to why we may or may not disagree on this, which I'm not saying that if you have less hours then your opinion it doesn't mean as much as mine. I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of why my views may look a bit different. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. So when most people imagine Scout in TF2, a lot of people picture the same thing, right? They think of Scout being able to run very fast and being able to use his mobility in general to avoid his relatively low amount of health, right? Which, in other words, I would say that most people understand the core gameplay of Scout, but I would say that mastering the allegedly basic utilities that Scout has is an extremely difficult task, and I would say that it puts Scout as one of the harder classes in general to master. So if you have played TF2 for a long time, you would know that a lot of the mechanics that are not trying to be flashy or advanced, that are just more basic, are actually mechanics that add a lot more complexity in general than the mechanics that are attempting to be advanced, right? And I would say that Scout is the class that proves that concept the most. So I'm not just gonna yap to you guys about super advanced things you can do as Scout, because obviously people understand what he's supposed to be doing and people understand his role pretty well, but in my opinion, actually perfecting that role is one of the more difficult classes in the game to hit that theoretical max of. And for that reason, I would put Scout into the high skill ceiling tier. And I would put Scout to the highest tier for this tier list, but there are a couple classes, in my opinion, that take that concept I talked about earlier of trying to overcomplicate very basic mechanics to an intense degree. Soldier. So in my last video, I said that Soldier, in my eyes, has one of the biggest differences between his skill floor and skill ceiling. And as crazy as it may seem, I would say that Soldier is at the higher echelon of maximum potentials in this game. So the tech of Soldier in TF2 is arguably some of the most complex an interesting movement to master in gaming, period, in my opinion. From the obvious complex parts of Soldier to master, kind of stupid things like quad sync jumps or even like triple sync jumps to even just mastering the basic fundamentals of rocket jumping and knowing when any of that is applicable in the different settings of TF2 is like incredible. To hit perfection for Soldier, in my eyes, isn't just about hitting the maximum potential for the basic soldiering things we know him for, like being able to hit like air shots and stuff like that, but it's mastering his movement tech, which if you don't know, mastering completely perfection levels of Soldier's movement tech is like damn near impossible. And the people who hold the records for times in jump maps for Soldier have thousands of hours, and not just Soldier, but specifically being able to master his movement. And even the top jump players in the world are not perfect at it. So even if we throw the movement tech of Soldier out and we just focus on the basic things for Soldier, that would already put him at pretty high for skill ceilings. But if we take into account not just mastering the basic things we know Soldier for, but mastering every aspect of his tech in general, it's a damn near impossible task. And a big factor when thinking about the tech of Soldier is that a lot of the tech you would learn for the other classes are not very applicable when it comes to like the base game, but learning the movement tech of Soldier is very useful inside of the base game, and understanding where it's all meant to be put into place is very hard. So I would say that the difference in game knowledge between a Soldier who just hit the skill floor versus hit the skill ceiling is the biggest in the game. And just in general, in my eyes, he is the hardest to hit skill ceiling. So I'd say Soldier deserves to be into the hardest skill ceiling tier. So Pyro is seen as a pretty easy class in general, and a lot of people take their experiences with how most Pyro players play and let that influence how they see the skill of Pyro in general, which for this I do not agree with. Pyro's skill floor is very easy, and a lot of people play him like very stupid, but I think he deserves to be seen in a much better light when it comes to skill ceilings. Because Pyro has decent tech when it comes to his DPS as well as his mobility. Most of his primary, secondaries, and his melees actually give him a different style of playing. And even though in general Pyro's play in a very similar way, the maximum potential of him, in my opinion, is actually kind of high. So about his tech when it comes to DPS, you can look at the fact that you actually need to lead on his flames a little bit to maximize the amount of damage that you do per tick. And if you want to go beyond that, you can even look at more advanced things, like the fact that the length of his flames is actually dependent on the amount of speed that he currently has. And then on top of that, if we're going to try and be real, mastering the reflex of every projectile in this game is very difficult, and trying to become perfect at that is an almost impossible task. And then beyond just the DPS tech that he also has some movement tech in the form of flare jumps, as well as being able to have the most advanced form of surfing off of damage in this game, because he can actually guide it in the form of air blast to be able to reflect jump, right? So I would say that because of all of that, Pyro actually has a pretty high skill ceiling, and that he deserves to be inside of the high skill ceiling tier. And even though 99% of Pyros don't play him to actually try hard at this game, I would say that the potential is absolutely there for a high level of gameplay for Pyro. So Demoman is another one of those classes similar to Soldier in my opinion, where mastering him isn't just about mastering the like typical demo shit that we know him for, like trying to hit pipes or trying to gauge the distances that you need to hold down mouse 1 to like hit keys or whatever. But a lot of it comes down to mastering Demo's movement tech for me, which makes his generally basic gameplay extremely advanced. So, sticky jumping doesn't seem as dynamic on face value as like Soldier's tech, and I do think the rocket jumping beats it by a tad bit, but mastering all the little weird jank behind sticky jumping does take a stupid amount of time, and sticky jumping isn't even the end of his tech, because with his shields, you have to have a pretty insane amount of knowledge to be able to understand where all like the damping spots are and knowing where it's actually useful to use it. And so because of that, I would put Demoman above the classes inside of the high skill ceiling tier, and I do think he deserves to be inside of the highest skill ceiling tier. But where Soldier beats him by a little bit, in my opinion, is the usefulness of the extreme tech that Demoman has. So I think what it comes down to for Soldier versus Demo in this regard is like where is like the quantity over quality, right? Demo has a lot of different movement techs that are very crazy and useful to understand, but it doesn't compare to the usefulness and the dynamics of Soldiers. So yes, Demo has a bunch of different movement tech that you can learn, and yes, it is very difficult. That's why I do think Demoman deserves to be into the highest skill ceiling, but no, I don't think it's as applicable in this game as mastering something like rocket jumping. And so for that reason, I see both Soldier and Demo as like titans of skill ceilings in this game, but Demo is just barely behind Soldier. So for Heavy, sadly, he doesn't really have a lot of tech in general, which if you've seen how I've ranked these classes so far, I put a pretty big amount of emphasis on a class's tech when trying to rank their skill ceilings. And Heavy doesn't really have that same consideration, but there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I really enjoy playing Heavy. He's one of the highest amount of hours that I have in this game, but I wouldn't consider it wrong to say that he's pretty easy when it comes to skill ceilings. Like, the most advanced tech that he really has is pretty simple things like trying to perfect your hacking, or trying to perfect being able to jump around corners while we're revving up. But comparatively to the rest of the classes, I wouldn't say he's very hard, and sadly I would have to put Heavy towards the easy skill ceiling, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, a lot of people kind of associate like easy in TF2 with like brain dead or being annoying, but I don't really care, to be honest, and Heavy is a very fun class to me, but I don't think it's unfair to say that he has a pretty easy skill ceiling when compared to the rest of the cast. And just to reiterate, I don't think any skill ceiling is easy to hit in this game, but I don't think it's completely unfair to say that Heavy is pretty easy when compared to the rest of the classes. Engineer is another one of those classes for me where it's kind of like a strange thing to have to place them on this list. And Engineer tech is some of the most like interesting and like crazy tech to me inside in this entire game, but he's also one of those classes where you can overcomplicate very easy to understand things like crazy. But before I get into that, just like how I mentioned in my skill floors list, the skill ceiling of engineer is one of the more dependent on map knowledge in this game in my opinion. And for engineer, his tech is in a very unique place for me because mastering the tech behind him is not going to benefit you in mastering the tech of like the other classes. He's a very specialized class when it comes to trying to master them. And to give a good example of that is some of his mechanics, such as like entry jumping, right? He has a lot of tech like that is so specific to his class that your game knowledge in general is not going to save you when trying to learn it. And another issue for me in general when talking about his tech is that he has a lot of very strange tech, like for example being able to short circuit jump off of like stacked prop dynamics on specific maps, and it's very advanced, but the issue when trying to gauge it for a skill ceiling is where it's actually going to be useful to learn. So it doesn't really like actually help you as an engineer to be able to learn that to hit your skill ceiling. So it's not due to a lack of tech for him, it's due to a lack of finding a use for it. So I would say his skill ceiling is around the mid tier, and I don't think he is easy by any means, and I'm not trying to downplay the amount of tech or the advancement of his tech in general, but hitting the theoretical peak of him, it's hard to say whether his strange tech would be able to actually be applicable in like a competitive like realm, right? And in general, I'd say his tech is so specialized that it's hard to actually gauge that when talking about skill ceilings. Medic at a high level play is the absolutely most important class or role in this game. Medic's role as support in almost every setting in this game is absolutely crucial, and similar to Scout, Soldier, or Demo, a lot of really good players play him. However, unlike Scout, Soldier, and Demo, where exceptional players play them not only for their utility as like a generalist, but also for their like insane skill ceilings, Medic is not played at a high level for his skill ceiling and his dynamics as a class, but almost exclusively for his required presence to be competitive almost at all. So a Medic for sure has tech, and his mastery of the universally useful tech to learn in this game, like surfing off of enemy players' damage, is arguably much more important for his healing, because mastering survivability in this game is crucial for a medic's skill ceiling. And a medic that feels like impossible to kill straight up wins games. It also takes a long time to fully realize how to preserve like your Uber and know when it's right to push. And a really good medic takes an extremely long time to get there. However, like I said, I would say a maximum potential of any class in this game takes a long time, and when put against the other classes, I see Medic's ceiling to be pretty behind, and for this reason, I would say Medic deserves to be around the mid skill ceiling tier and just a bit behind Engi, but again, there's no such thing as like an easy skill ceiling, so I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm saying that like Heavy, Engi, or Medic are easy to hit the absolute maximum potential of, because that would be very stupid. So everyone knows that a really good sniper can ruin your fucking day. but I think this lets a lot of the TF2 community overblow how hard it actually is to get good at him. Because many people have said it before, but the difference between his floor and ceiling is not big when compared to the rest of the cast. Sniper is hard to get okay at, but once you're there, it's not hard to hit the ceiling, in my opinion. And if you've been paying attention to how I have put the rest of the classes so far, I do put a really heavy amount of weight onto the tech of a certain class, and realistically, Sniper doesn't really have a lot of tech to him. A lot of the things that makes him hit his skill ceiling is just becoming really good at the things that he needed to get good at to hit his skill floor. So I would say that he ranks towards the bottom of the mid skill ceiling tier. And then when he's compared to the other classes' perfects, he's just not really there for me. And to prove this point, in the recent time that you've played TF2, how many snipers have you encountered that seem like nearly perfect? Like snipers that never miss headshots, they're always in a spots where you can't reach, and they are just playing sniper at like the optimal level, or like damn near it, right? Now, how many times recently have you encountered somebody playing a different class to that degree? It's probably not a lot, right? And while a lot of players would attribute it to this sniper players being good, which I would say that it's not about that. It's more so that there's not a lot of complexity in the skills that he needs to get like good at. If you remember from my last video, I put Spy as the hardest class to hit the skill floor of, and I also believe his skill ceiling is pretty high. Although you could say there's not a lot of tech as Spy, I find the difficulty of mastering Spy to come from just the sheer amount of like bullshit you have to overcome to hit his skill ceiling. His difficulty comes from the fact that not being perfect at a lot of the skills he needs to be good at will a lot of the time kill you. He does not have much gimmicky things about him, and the gimmicky things about him detriment him more than actually help him. So unlike the last video, I wouldn't place him at the highest echelon of this list, because I don't see him as competition for Soldier or Demo for skill ceilings, but I absolutely think he deserves to be in the high skill ceiling tier, in between Scout and Pyro. Although I have put a lot of merit into the tech of classes to rank the previous ones, I put Spy as high, despite his lack of tech in comparison, because almost all of his options for killing people have a lot of mastery behind them. And becoming perfect at his cloak management and understanding the mechanics of what makes a backstab for him and stuff like that, or how to remain survivable despite being a damage dealing class with some of the shittiest damage dealing capabilities in the game, makes his skill ceiling pretty difficult, in my opinion. So that is the end of today's video. I'll have up my final tier list up for a while so you can take it in and find what you disagree or agree with me on. Before I go, I just want to say thank you for all the support on the last one. I know a couple thousand views is not much in the grand scheme of things, but I couldn't have been more happy for it being my very first video on this channel. I'm going to try and post about 2 videos a month, but understand that I have a full-time job and I have a lot going on in my life right now. And as of right now, this is just a hobby of mine. So stay tuned and please subscribe for future videos. And I will talk to you guys later. Have a good day.